Welcome back to the Courage Keepers podcast. This is a space dedicated to the idea that courage isn't a solo act, it's a collective practice. At the heart of the Courage Keepers philosophy is the belief that bravery is the most sustainable when it's rooted in connection. We focus on the pathways that allow us to lead with heart, and today we're exploring a concept that sits at the intersection of leadership and performance: confidence. To walk us through this, I'm joined by Mitch Greene. Dr. Mitchell Greene is an internationally recognized licensed clinical and sports psychologist whose success over the past 20 plus years is his ability to tailor personalized solutions to his clients' problems. He works primarily with athletes pursuing high performance goals and coaches in athletic departments looking to educate their student athletes on mental health and performance enhancement strategies. Mitch's book, Courage Over Confidence, offers a new approach to managing a performer's inner chatter that can destroy confidence and cause even the most highly trained competitors to lose focus and underperform. Written for competitive athletes from juniors to professionals and to Olympians, this book is also a game changer for coaches and parents looking for ways to further understand why athletes struggle and remain locked in and not being positive. Mitch challenges the mainstream obsession with feeling confident. In his work with elite athletes and high stake professionals, Greene has found that the quest for confidence can actually be a trap. When an athlete's mind is racing with chatter, those nagging thoughts of past failures and what ifs, okay, are like trying to build a house on quicksand. So I'm so excited to have Mitch with us today. I met Mitch probably pre-COVID, just pre-COVID, back in the early 2020, or probably that time up at Middlebury College, when I was speaking to a variety of athletic teams. And at the same time, Mitch was up there, I believe, visiting his daughter, but also speaking with the freshman class and talking with them about mind chatter and the concept of courage over confidence. Welcome to the podcast, Mitch.
John, I appreciate it. And I remember that moment where I had a chance to hear you speak and was so impressed. And since then, we've had a long relationship. So
Yeah, it's been
I'm glad
wonderful.
it's been
Yeah,
wonderful.
thank you.
hmm
Mitch, tell me about your interest in sports psychology and its intersection with your work in clinical psychology.
Well, as you mentioned, I got my PhD in clinical psychology and I started out my career as a traditional therapist. By the way, I still consider myself a therapist more than I think of myself as a sports psychologist. We can talk about that certainly. But there was a point in my career where I had the opportunity to sort of stay on the path I was on doing the traditional work or make a leap into the world of sports psychology. Um, and a lot of it was my fascination with athletes that my dad and I would watch on TV, and he would always point out to me, "See, he's a professional, and the ball still goes through his legs," or "See, she's a professional, and she still, can't hit the pitch." And it was sort of always there for me, this idea that how could somebody be so good yet stink so bad in moments of high pressure. And then about 10 years into my clinical career, there was sort of an opportunity for me to take stock of my career and where I wanted to go. And I really discovered the world of sports psychology at that point. I really didn't know much about it. In fact, you want to talk about courage over confidence. I took an enormous leap. My wife said, "What are you doing? Like you're really busy. People know you all around town. Like what are you doing?" But there was something inside of me that had to do it and had to take the leap. And I was excited to discover, and it's true to this day, that I could combine my clinical skills and my sport experience and expertise in sort of one package. And I really, again, see my work today as much as being a therapist with a sports psychology expertise. Then I see myself as purely a sports psychologist.
That's wonderful. That's wonderful, Mitch. When talking about and I'm going to ask you this question next about the Courage platform, you brought this up when you and I were meeting with a bunch of coaches up at Middlebury, 5 years ago or so. And you had mentioned this notion of courage over confidence. And And I started thinking about that. So you were probably one of the pioneers to help my mindset begin to shift,
I appreciate it.
from a concept of just being confident, but the importance of the power of courage that comes over that. Can you kind of share with us a little bit more about your thoughts on the courage platform?
Yeah, I think one of the things I want to stress is there's a lot of talk more and more these days about being courageous in sport, which I think is great, and it touches my heart to know that I may have helped you in expanding your vision of things in the same way you've helped me. Um, the courage platform is very much about is really more about acceptance. I want to focus on that part of it than the courage part of it, so to speak.
Sure. Yes.
It's more the acceptance about who you are in that very moment, that you don't need to be somebody or feel something different than who you are. And when I could tell an athlete or a performer that they don't need to feel a certain way or be a certain way in order to succeed or perform well, I mean, that's really what's behind it. The confidence piece of it, and then the courage piece. The confidence piece is like, I need to feel something in order to be something. Um, and so that to me is sort of where my background's been in mindfulness and acceptance based approach, which is
Hmm.
who you are in that very moment is enough, that you don't need to be more of something you don't need more confidence in order to perform well. And so from that grounding in my clinical work, the acceptance-based work that I've did, even as a clinician, um, sort of developed this mantra that I've now trademarked, as you know, of courage over confidence, which is it's really more about in the face of doubt and fear, um, leaning in rather than pushing back, and discovering what you're capable of. And um, so yes, it's the courage platform sits on the acceptance based platform, which is who I am in that very moment is enough, um, versus that voice in their head that tries to convince them, that I call the mind chatter, that they're not enough.
Hmm. That I love it. So interesting is that why is it so challenging for athletes to accept where they are in the notion of being enough?
Well, I would put that on what I call mind chatter, as you know, which is sort of what the book is about that I wrote, which is mind chatter I define as doubts and second guessing and negative thinking, sort of a parade going on in people's heads of doubt and second guessing and negative thinking. And those, as you know, John, show those that mind chatter shows up under very specific conditions. It doesn't necessarily show up in practice. It may not show up in training sessions. It can, by the way, but it's certainly going to show up in high stakes affairs. And it's in those moments where the chatter is the loudest and it starts barking at us. And so the most confident athlete during the week all of a sudden is terrified because chatter has gotten a hold of them. And we could talk more about how and why that is, and tries to convince them that they're not ready, not prepared, need another week of training, need another long run or a couple extra at bats, and and um, and so, as I say to people, you don't need to be more confident. My job is to teach you how to manage the doubts. You don't need to be more of something you're not, but no one's yet taught you how to manage these doubts. That's my job, manage the mind chatter. And once we get there, some exciting things can happen for these athletes, that's for sure.
Yeah, that is, and it's many times it's that leap. It's that leap that the athlete has to take, and that you help them kind of cross that bridge with that. Could you go a little bit deeper into the concept of mind chatter? I know that, I look back at my lacrosse career and finding that where the chatter would go so great. I was a lacrosse goalie and get so great at times when I'd make an error, and how to make that shift. And sometimes the shift felt like it was like magical. It just happened, and suddenly I was in the zone.
Yeah,
Could you talk a little bit more about the
sure.
mechanics of chatter?
Sure. I describe chatter as sort of like everybody gets at some level that you're going to be nervous when you're playing a game, in front of fans, or that counts. My mind chatter I describe as that sort of extra top layer, that 25%, where it's not just about being nervous, it's about being scared, and not just scared and terrified that you're not going to play well, John, but that your whole life now could take a total turn for the worse in the most dramatic, consequential ways if, in fact, you don't make the pass, score the goal, or win the game. And those people, when I describe to them that I get it, this isn't just about being nervous. This is about feeling as though the most catastrophic ending is awaiting you. And that's to me what mind chatter does to an athlete. It's again, every athlete knows they're going to mess up, make a mistake, but they don't come to see me for that. They come to see me because they're paralyzed by the fear that chatter puts in them, that somehow everything, I mean everything, not just the game, but their whole life, the future of who they're supposed to be, won't come to fruition. And so that's how chatter can really get a hold of an athlete, and it manifests itself in all kinds of ways. Feeling frozen, their legs feeling really heavy, throwing up before games or performances, running off a track if you're a track athlete in the middle of a race, faking injury, which is more common than people realize. Um, and my teaching is about, um, which is an eye opener for them, is getting to teach them about how chatter's job, its role in their lives, in all of our lives, is to protect them. And while in many examples it's great to have mind chatter, if somebody you thought had a couple extra drinks and you were going to get in the car with them, it's a great time to have mind chatter. It's a great time to have doubts and second guessing and negative thoughts because you don't know what's going to happen, and it's high stakes if you get in a car with somebody you shouldn't be getting into a car with. And in these, so I go through lots of interesting examples for them about drawing them in, about how helpful it is to have a voice in our heads in so many parts of our lives. Yet, when we get on the field, needless to say, it's totally unhelpful to have a chattery voice that's scaring the you know what out of you if you were about to make a mistake. So we're normalizing this voice. We're getting them to see in some ways that it's not them. And one of the most powerful sort of interventions, if you will, I can do with the athlete is saying that you are not your mind chatter. And I won't go into all the details there, but teaching them that they are not their mind chatter. We're treating it as if it's a separate entity. It's connected to them, but it has a wholly different agenda than they do. You go into your lacrosse game, John, hoping to make a couple good plays, get a bunch of ground balls, get an assist, and no turnovers, and help your team win. Well, your chatter doesn't care about any of that. Your chatter is only interested in the possibility that you're going to go home a sad puppy, and your coach is going to say, maybe I don't want to play you anymore because you don't seem to have what it takes. Does that give you at least a...
Yeah, it certainly does. And I think you're preaching to the choir here. And I think you're preaching to the audience also. From that notion, the past can be so powerful, and then
by past you mean
the past thoughts, feelings, body response.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and how that comes alive. Can you speak to a little bit about that?
Oh yeah. One of the hallmarks of mind chatter is that it time travels. Tara Brach, a very famous mindfulness teacher, is a person who uses this term time traveling, as do other mindfulness teachers. And so here you are right in that moment. For those of you who are watching the video, here you are, here's where you show up to the game, but you don't show up alone to the game. You show up, and so does your mind chatter. You're the one sort of looking to focus on the next play, the first quarter, the first opportunity you get. And mind chatter is focused on the past, sometimes about the last time you screwed that one up. And then it jumps into the future. What if you do that again? And now by the time the end of the game happens, your statistics are horrible. And so this is why it's so hard to be in the moment. A lot of us talk to our athletes, a lot of coaches rightfully are telling athletes, you need to be present, need to be in the moment. But I think a lot of times that falls on deaf ears if they don't yet know about mind chatter, and they don't know about a force that's working in complete opposite way than what they're intending. Mind chatter's job is to get you to think about the last time this didn't go so well, and start to haunt you that if you don't succeed again, you're going to get the same result. And all of a sudden the athlete isn't thinking about the next play, the next opportunity. They're thinking about the consequences of another bad game. So that time traveling piece of my conversation with athletes, and I put it on a big whiteboard and we map it out, we draw it out. I always make it visual for my athletes. I have a 6 foot by basically 4 foot whiteboard in my office that we draw this out, we make it visual. I get them to see, I get them to comment on it. Where do they lose focus? Where does chatter tend to show up? By the way, for some athletes, for many athletes, it doesn't just show up when the game starts. It shows up in the locker room. It shows up in the hotel room. It shows up 4 days before when they're in school and they can't concentrate. So we try to find out where chatter gets started and how it time travels. And then, of course, we talk about how to manage it and work with it.
So as you're talking about the past and time traveling, what about future expectations that athletes have of themselves?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's all baked into this conversation, which is the way I kind of get at it is we start to have this conversation, which if I had to pick one conversation that might be the most eye-opening, I think, for my athletes, is when we talk about what's at stake. Because we talk about mind chatter showing up when there's uncertainty and high stakes, and they go, yes, yes, totally, totally. That's so true. It shows up in this game, but not in that game because that one I didn't care about. I go, well, what's at stake? What are the stakes? And before you know it, we have a list on the board of, let's say, 15 aspects of their lives and of the game that are at stake. Everything from winning and losing, from their ranking going up or down, to disappointing their teammates. But the number one, if I had to say in all my years, the most consistent one that shows up whether you're a lacrosse player or a figure skater is not meeting expectations. The fear of not meeting expectations, that's what's at stake. Because the athletes that come to me, by the time they get to me, they've sort of tried everything else. Mm-hmm. These are the ones whose identity and reputation are so tied up in being the golfer. They wear the golf clothes around school all day. Everybody knows the last thing they do when they leave school is they're going right to practice, and then they're going from practice to hit extra balls. Their identity and their reputation, and therefore the expectations are, because they are good, that if they don't meet them, that somehow they're a fraud, they're illegitimate. And so we get at expectations usually through that conversation. I don't disabuse them of this. I don't tell them that they're making this up. I don't tell them that there aren't expectations. But what I do get them to see is that all of these expectations, everything that mind chatter is drumming up for them, is all tied to outcome and results. In other words, you can't screw up your reputation if you have good results. You can't feel like a failure if you have good results. You can't feel like a fraud if you have good results. So it's all result oriented. And as many of people who are watching this who know about sports psychology, we certainly talk a lot about outcome focus versus process focus. And that's often how I get into that conversation. I use different language than that, but it's fundamentally the same as others would talk about it.
One of the areas that you've mentioned to me before is the notion of cheap confidence and the danger of that. Could you share more about that?
Yeah, it comes back to one of the first things I said about not accepting who we are in the moment and how we feel is enough. And so people feel as though they need to pump themselves up with fake affirmations and fake beliefs that they're a beast, that they're going to be a killer out there, that they have no fear, and that they're fearless. And for the people who come talk to me, they usually tell me that lasts about 30 seconds, and about 30 seconds later, they're feeling like the biggest wimp and coward. It's not only detrimental to them, it actually makes them feel worse because they feel like they can't even do this confidence thing right. Like everyone's telling them they're supposed to be confident. They're telling themselves all these things that would be confident enhancing. And now they feel even worse than they did when they started. And so that sort of cheap confidence way usually doesn't get them too far, and they wind up feeling like they're back in the same place, if not in a worse place when they started. So that's sort of my spiel on cheap confidence.
Sure. And then you've also mentioned this notion, I think you've addressed it to a certain degree so far, Mitch, the notion of fear and anxiety reporting for duty.
Yeah. Yes. Again, the chatter is there to protect us. Again, and there's lots of examples, as I referenced before, of fear and anxiety or mind chatter reporting for duty and helping us. And very much in the same way, when I say they show up to the game and their chatter shows up to the game, Their chatter, which is basically fear-based, needless to say, and I have no problem if you want to call it anxiety, is showing up and reporting for duty in the sense that it's doing its job. It senses under this uncertain high stakes game that you're about to play in the playoffs that it needs to show up and warn you that future you is in jeopardy. Everything you thought you were, could be, might be, should be is in jeopardy. And so what we do is we instead of going, oh my God, I can't believe I'm thinking that again, which is when I say that to my athletes, they go, oh my God, that's so me. I can't believe I'm having this thought again. They have chatter, and then they have chatter on top of their chatter, which is I call like a double whammy. They have chatter about the fact that they're having chatter because they didn't have it on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday where they were killing it in the workouts. They were in the zone on point. And so they feel different. And when you feel different, you start to think that somehow something is wrong. And so I'm going, no, nothing wrong. It's just chatter reporting for duty, doing what it does. And you will feel different. And you have to learn how to play with this different feeling, which doesn't make you feel the most confident. When chatter is barking in your ear, confidence can be hard to find.
Yeah, and that can be, and I've seen this with some athletes before, in different types of situations. Can you reprise, as we begin to kind of finish up our time together, the notion of, with what you've been talking about with chatter and fear and anxiety, reporting for duty and cheap confidence, the notion of being present and that notion, of being where you need to be at that moment.
Yeah.
Acceptance.
Yeah, there's a Buddhist saying that what you resist will persist, and what you let be will let you be. What you resist persist, and what you let be will let you be. So part of the philosophy and the step-by-step approach I take is getting people to make room for chatter. Again, instead of seeing it as an enemy, instead of seeing it as a sign of a problem, we begin to sort of let it be in the room. We let it kind of come in. Again, very mindfulness-based approach, acceptance-based approach. We let it be there, like we don't bother it, so maybe it won't bother us. And athletes, the better they can get in this sort of room making way, they're more able to sort of settle in and focus on what's important in the moment, like the game or the race or the goals that they may have. And so a lot of people confuse or down on goal setting, but I feel like the people who tell me they're down on goal setting are down on it because it doesn't work because they haven't first learned how to manage the chatter. Once you manage the chatter, then you could sort of start to focus on things that are in the moment, the things that are under your control. I call them action goals, the things that and that's the most fun part of the work I do is developing those action goals with my clients. I don't necessarily tell them what the action goal should be. I ask them about goals, and then together we frame them in such a way that they could remember them when they need to remember them. And again, that is an in the moment type of thing, but that can't happen if you don't make that room for chatter and give it a place to be and a space to be. And it's a very counterintuitive approach for many of the athletes. By the time they get to me, they're so busy trying to pump themselves up and get rid of the chatter or avoid those thoughts that it sometimes takes a little time for athletes to wrap their head around it. But once they do, you start to see them feel a little bit more free. Mm-hmm. You start to have them still feel a little bit more that they can just play.
Sure.
And that's, of course, really exciting to see.
Great. Well, Mitch, thank you so much for your thoughts in there. I'm so excited to have you on today talking about this notion, of courage over confidence, within all the different processes of being an athlete there too. How can people get in touch with you?
I appreciate that, John. I would say my website is the best place to start, which is greenepsych.com, greenepsych.com. From there, you could read about me, you could read about our staff, you can hop on and get a newsletter. You could find our social channels, our Instagram, all through the website, and reach out if you want to reach out. So I would encourage people to go to the website for more information.
Great. And you're in the Philadelphia-based area, correct?
That's right. We're in the suburbs of Philadelphia, right out of there. But of course, we work with people all over the country, all over the world, through virtual. And so if anybody's interested in finding out about us, we'd love for them to check us out.
Wonderful. So, folks, thank you very much for being in today's podcast with our guest, Mitch Greene. We look forward to seeing you next month when we focus on compassion. And our guest will be Vicki Wetterskrog, who's actually a palliative care nurse at Massachusetts General Hospital. We look forward to having you join us then. Thank you very much again, and thank you very much, Mitch.
Thank you.